Hi everyone. So this is the third and last concept that will be taught for this week. So after this video you will have another homework assignment. And then next week we will go over 2 concepts, and then we'll do a small quiz over all the stuff from this week, the radical stuff, and then stuff from next week, quadratic stuff. And actually this thing that we're going to talk about, or the concept we're going to talk about today, is radicals but with quadratics. So quadratics was at the end of Algebra 1. So I'm hoping that you stayed along with everybody and got some of that information. But remember, a quadratic has the squared on the x. When you graph it, it makes a parabola or a U shape. We talked about factoring quadratics. So for instance, something you may have seen is y equals x squared plus 4x plus, let me think here, plus 4. We'll do that one. Okay, so the way I taught it, which may be different than the way that you learned it, is I do a crisscross. When I multiply, I want this number 4. When I add, I want this number that's in the middle, which happens in this case to be 4. So 2 numbers that multiply to 4 but add to 4 would be 2 and 2. So then I start factoring it. I do x plus 2, that's that guy, and then another x plus 2, and that equals y. Well, in this section, we're going to set this equal to 0, and you're actually going to solve for x's. So this factoring happened last year in Algebra 1. We're going to solve for it. But before we do that, there are different methods to solve for these. The one we're going to go over today is the square root method, because we've been working with square roots, so it only makes sense to go into the square root method, right? What I want you to do is I need for you to pause me, and I want you to do number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4 on your own. You should not need a calculator for those 4. So go ahead, pause me. When you're done, unpause me, and I'm going to go through those. All right, simplify each. Square root of 36 is 6. This guy looks a little different than what you have seen. You just do the top and you do the bottom, and then that's your answer. So the square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 25 is 5, so my answer is 2/5. This one we're solving. This is a 2-step equation that you're solving. We have a brick wall. What you do to one side, you do to the other, right? So I have negative 40 to get it to the other side, because our goal is to solve for x, as I add 40 to both sides, so opposite operations. That cancels, because if I'm at negative 40 and go up 40, I'm at 0. So I'm left with 2x on this side equals 0 plus 40 is 40. And divide by 2, so I get x equals 20. Kind of same process here. Subtract 2, I get negative 6x equals negative 3. Divide by negative 6, divide by negative 6. Be careful. X does not equal positive 2. It does not equal negative 2. It equals a positive, because negative over negative is positive. 3 over 6. So it's a fraction, 3/6. But I reduce that. 3/6 reduces to 1/2. Okay. Couple things I want to talk about. I briefly spoke about this in our radicals video. Is that 6 is actually not the only solution to this guy. It's actually a positive 6, because positive 6 times positive 6 is 36. But it's also a negative 6. That's how you write that, positive or negative. Meaning that I could have a negative times a negative and get that positive answer. So a negative 6 times a negative 6 gives me positive 36. 6 times 6 gives me 36. And that's what this little box right here is talking about. That when I take the square root of a number, I actually have 2 answers. I have the positive of it and I have the negative of it. Because 3 times 3 is 9, and negative 3 times negative 3 is also 9. So we read this as plus or minus 3, or positive or negative 3. Find the square root of each. This is 5. This is 15, 16, or 17. See, even I get confused sometimes, guys. But I don't want to tell you the wrong answer with you guys not sitting here to tell me, hey, Miss Stoll, you're wrong. That's 25, 625. The square root of that is 25. This one, take the square root of 4, which is 2, square root of 9, which is 3. All right, turn to the next page. So that essentially is just a review. This is a review. However, this is our new concept that we're going to be talking about today. It's a review from last year in Algebra 1. Okay, so we're going to be solving quadratics by using the square root method. So solving square root method solve quadratics. Okay? That is what we are doing here. So your goal is to solve the quadratic by using the square root method. What does that mean? Like, what is a quadratic? What does it mean to solve it? I mean, that's kind of confusing, right? So remember, quadratic is like what I told you on the front. It has a squared on an x value. If I'm solving it, it means that when I graph that quadratic, it makes a U shape. Some U's are skinny, some U's are fat, some U's go up, some U's go down. So it's called a parabola. So when you graph a quadratic, it makes a parabola, a U-shaped graph on a coordinate grid. The solutions that we are talking about is where it crosses the x-axis. So we could have two solutions. We could have just one solution. How would that look? If we had one solution, its lowest or highest point is directly on the x-axis. So that would be one solution. Or you could have some quadratics that have no solution, meaning they are above the x-axis and they go up, or they are below the x-axis going down, and they will never cross the x-axis. So you can have two solutions, one solution, or no solutions on quadratics. So when we're solving them, we're finding their solutions. We're finding where do they cross the x-axis. All right, so your goal here is to get the x squared term by itself and then solve it. Okay, so here, x squared term is already by itself. So this quadratic started out as x squared minus 169 equals 0. That's the quadratic. They've already solved to get x squared by itself, so they moved the negative 169 to both sides by adding it. So now we're at positive 169. So your job now is to get x squared down to just x. To do that, you do inverse operations. So the inverse of squaring something is square rooting it. So since this is squared, I'm going to square root it. But just like in solving equations, what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So I also have to square root the 169. So x squared, the square root of x squared is just an x. Okay? Equals the square root of 169, that's one of our perfect square numbers, I know, is 13. But like we talked about on the front, it is a positive and negative 13. That is your solution. So how many solutions does this guy have? It has two. It has positive 13 and negative 13. Now, when you enter that into Schoology for an answer, it will say x equals blank and x equals blank. In the first blank, you can put either one, unless it says to you, put the leftmost number. Well, the leftmost number means we're all the way on the left. So would that be your positive 13 or your negative 13 if we're all the way left? That would be your negative 13. So you put negative 13 into this box. And then the second solution may be your rightmost number. So that would be the positive 13. You don't put the positive sign, you would just put 13. Let's say that it had only one solution. So you'd put the one solution in the box, and then it'll tell you in the directions. A lot of time it just wants NA, or if there's not another solution. So you put NA in the next box. All right, number 2. It's already solved with x squared on the one side by itself. So now to get x squared down to just x, I have to square root it. Or use different colors so that they don't run into each other. Square root, if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other. I get x equals square root of 121 is 11. But remember, we have a positive and negative 11. Next one, square root of 0. So what times itself equals 0? Well, 0 does. So x equals 0. Now, here's an example of I only have one solution. Because is 0 positive or negative? No, it's not. It's just kind of its own different thing. So it is not positive nor negative, so you have one solution here. It is 0. So if there's two blanks, most likely you'll put NA in the other blank. Next one, square root. Square root. I want everyone to take your calculator, and I want you to actually type that in. I want you to do second square root negative 49. You get a domain error. The reason being, it's a negative 49. When we talk about squaring a number, we talk about multiplying it by itself. So I know that the square root of regular 49 is 7. So if I take 7 times 7, I get 49. If I take negative 7 times negative 7, I get 49 also. So when would I ever multiply 7 by itself and get a negative 49? There's no way I can do that. because I either have two negatives or two positives, and in each case you get a positive number. So you can't take the square root of a negative number right now. You will learn in the future, in Algebra 2, that you will be able to take the square root of a negative number. But for our sake right now, we are going to say not applicable, NA. So NA, no answer right now, okay? So let's look at number 5. Do I even need to go through the process of square rooting that? Or do I see that x squared's by itself and I have a negative number over here? I see that, so it's NA. Number 6. So on these, x squared is not by itself. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to try to get x squared by itself. So I'm going to subtract 7. I get x squared equals 25. Now what I do is I try to get x by itself by square rooting. What I do to one side, I do to the other. So x equals positive or negative 5. Circle 7. Ooh, we'll do 8 together. 8. Okay, just leave 7 there. We'll come back to it. Brick wall. Trying to get x squared by itself. We're going to do order of operations backwards. So I'm going to move the negative 49 over. So I add 49, add 49. So I get 16x squared equals 49. I'm going to divide by 16, divide by 16. So now I have x squared equals 49 over 16. Do not turn that into a decimal. Leave it like that for now. Last step is to get that x squared down to just an x. So I'm going to square root, x equals positive and negative. These are like the ones on the front. What is the square root of 49? It is 7. What is the square root of 16? It is 8. That is your answer. Number 9. It's almost by itself, but I need to get rid of this 36. So I'm going to divide by 36 on both sides. I get x squared equals 1 over 36. Square root, x equals positive and negative. Square root of 1 is just 1. Square root of 36 is 6. Okay. 10, circle. 11, circle. 12, circle. Let's do 13 together. I want to get x squared by itself. I want to move it to this side actually though. So I'm going to add x squared to both sides, so I get x squared equals 90, which is nice because now I have a positive number. All right. To get x squared down to just x, I square root it, square root. I get x equals positive or negative. I don't want decimal answers. This is why we went over the reducing radical. So let's reduce that guy down. A reduces into 9 times 10, 3 times 3, 5 times 2, pair of 3s. So x equals a positive or negative. 3 comes to the outside. 5 and 2 are left on the inside, so multiply together, that is 10. Read your Schoology prompts. See if it wants a decimal answer. If it wanted a decimal answer, I would have done second square root of 90, and I get 9.48. If it wants it to the nearest tenth, it would be 9.5. Nearest hundredth, it would be 9.49, and it's positive and negative of that answer. Circle 14. The ones that you have circled, I want for you to do on your own real quick. So pause me. I'm going to pause myself and put the answers in, and then you're going to check when you're done. You'll have to pause most likely to check your answers because I don't have a ton of time left on this video. But number 7 was plus or minus 7. Number 8, there's no answer because I get a negative 49 over 100, and so that would mean that I'd have to take the square root of a negative number. So no answer on that one. This one, I square root both sides. 15 breaks down to 5 times 3, but it doesn't have any pairs. So this is the reduced answer on that, plus or minus 15. This one, I do subtract 90, so I have a negative 90, but I also divide by a negative 3, so 2 negatives make a positive, so it's a positive 30. The reason I went ahead and divided those and I didn't divide over here is because this would give me a decimal answer. This gives me a whole number answer. Square root. 30 breaks down to 6 times 5. 6 breaks down to 3 times 2, and then times 5, so there's no pair, so that is the reduced answer. This one, I'm going to add 64 to both sides, then divide by 2, and I get 32. I reduce down 32, and I get positive or negative 4 square roots of 2. Again, if they ask you to turn like that one into a decimal, second square root of 15, I get this decimal, and then it'd be the positive and negative of that. Hope that helps, guys.